I used to believe that family meant unconditional support, that when life knocked you down, your loved ones would be the first to help you back up. I spent 28 years believing this beautiful lie until the day I watched my parents write a $15,000 check for my brother's third DUI lawyer while simultaneously telling me to figure out my own legal nightmare alone. What I discovered about my family that day changed everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and my place in their world. My name is Sarah, and I'm the middle child in what I always thought was a close-knit family. My older brother Jake was the golden boy, captain of his high school football team, charismatic, the kind of person who could talk his way out of anything. My younger sister Emma was the baby, sweet and protected, never expected to handle anything difficult on her own. And then there was me, the responsible one, the problem solver, the one who kept everyone else's lives running smoothly while somehow always being expected to handle my own challenges without help. Growing up, I noticed the patterns but dismissed them as normal family dynamics. When Jake crashed Dad's car at 17, they bought him a newer one within a week. When I saved for months to buy my first car and it broke down, I was told that dealing with mechanics would be a good learning experience for me. When Emma struggled with math, they hired a private tutor. When I struggled with chemistry, I was handed Dad's old textbooks and told to figure it out. I convinced myself these differences were because I was more capable, more independent. My parents would say I was their strong one, their reliable daughter who didn't need as much help. I wore that label like a badge of honor, never realizing it was actually a prison that would keep me isolated when I needed support most. The pattern became impossible to ignore 3 years ago when Jake got his second DUI. I watched my parents spring into action like a well-oiled machine. Mom immediately called their friend who was a lawyer, Dad researched the best DUI attorneys in the state, and within 48 hours, they had hired a $12,000 legal team to minimize Jake's consequences. The family rallied around him, treating his arrest like a tragedy that had happened to all of us rather than a consequence of his choices. I remember sitting at the family dinner where they discussed Jake's situation, watching them strategize ways to protect his career, his reputation, his future. Mom worried about how this would affect his job prospects. Dad talked about calling in favors to get him into a good rehabilitation program that would look impressive to the judge. Emma offered to write a character reference letter. The whole family was unified in their mission to save Jake from himself. At that same dinner, I mentioned that I was having some issues with my landlord who was trying to keep my security deposit illegally and possibly pursue eviction based on false claims. I had documentation proving my case, but I was worried about the legal complexities and potential costs. The response was immediate and crushing in its dismissiveness. Dad told me that small claims court was straightforward and I should be able to handle it myself. Mom suggested I look up tenant rights online. Emma said nothing. The conversation moved on to Jake's situation within minutes. I handled my landlord issue alone, spent weeks researching tenant law, represented myself in small claims court, and won. I recovered my full deposit plus damages. My family's response to my victory was a brief congratulations before returning to discussions about Jake's case. I began to see a pattern that would become devastatingly clear over the following years. Jake's second DUI was resolved with minimal consequences thanks to his expensive legal team. He received probation, community service, and mandatory counseling. The family celebrated this outcome as if he had been wrongfully accused, rather than getting away with a crime that could have killed someone. I watched them toast his legal victory at dinner while I sat there knowing I had fought my own legal battle completely alone. The third DUI happened last fall, and this time I paid attention to every detail of my family's response. Jake had been drinking at a work event, drove home, and rear-ended another car at a red light. No one was seriously injured, but his blood alcohol was well over the legal limit, and this was now his third offense in 7 years. The consequences were potentially severe: possible jail time, mandatory alcohol treatment, loss of license, and significant career implications. My parents' response was immediate and comprehensive. Dad took time off work to research attorneys and accompany Jake to consultations. Mom coordinated with family friends who had legal connections. They hired the most expensive DUI attorney in the city at a cost of $15,000, plus additional fees for expert witnesses and case preparation that brought the total to nearly $20,000. They also paid for Jake to enter a private rehabilitation program before his court date to demonstrate his commitment to change. I watched this mobilization of family resources with a mixture of familiar disappointment and growing clarity about my place in the family hierarchy. Jake was 31 years old, had a well-paying job, and had been through this process twice before. Yet he was treated like a victim of circumstances rather than someone who repeatedly chose to endanger lives by drinking and driving. The family narrative was that Jake was struggling and needed support, not that he was a grown man who refused to take responsibility for his dangerous choices. During this time, I was dealing with my own legal crisis that was far more serious than anything I had faced before. I had been working as a freelance marketing consultant while building my own agency, and one of my former clients was pursuing a lawsuit against me for alleged breach of contract and intellectual property theft. The claims were completely false. I had documentation proving that I had fulfilled all contractual obligations and that the ideas they claimed I stole were actually concepts I had developed and pitched to them in our initial meetings. However, the client was a large corporation with unlimited legal resources, and they were using their lawsuit as intimidation to avoid paying the $25,000 they owed me for completed work. Their strategy was clear: bury me in legal costs until I gave up and walked away from what they owed me. Without proper legal representation, I risked not only losing the money they owed me, but potentially facing significant damages if their false claims were believed. I needed a business litigation attorney, and the consultation fees alone were $500 to $750 per hour. The estimated cost for proper representation through trial was $30,000 to $50,000, money I didn't have since I was still building my business, and the client hadn't paid me for work already completed. This was my career, my reputation, and my financial future at stake. I approached my family for help during the same week they were finalizing Jake's legal team. I explained the situation clearly. This was a corporation trying to bully me into giving up money they legitimately owed me. I had strong documentation supporting my case, but I needed legal representation to fight back effectively. I wasn't asking for a gift. I was asking for a loan that I would repay once I won the case and recovered what was owed to me. The response was swift and devastating in its coldness. Dad told me that business lawsuits were part of being an entrepreneur, and I needed to figure out how to handle it myself. Mom suggested I try to negotiate directly with the client or find a lawyer who would work on contingency. When I explained that business litigation attorneys rarely work on contingency for these types of cases, she shrugged and said I should have planned better for these kinds of situations. The contrast was staggering. Jake, who had committed his third drunk driving offense and endangered lives, received immediate, comprehensive, and expensive legal support without question. I, who was being fraudulently sued by a corporation trying to steal my work and avoid payment, was told to figure it out alone. The message was clear. Jake's problems were family problems that required collective resources and support, while my problems were personal challenges I was expected to handle independently. I sat in my apartment that night, surrounded by legal documents and printouts of attorney consultations I couldn't afford, and finally acknowledged what I had been avoiding for years. I was not truly part of my family's inner circle. I was the responsible one who was expected to be self-sufficient, while Jake was the beloved son who deserved protection from consequences. The pattern had been there all along, but this legal crisis made it undeniable. I ended up representing myself against a corporate legal team, spending every free moment for 6 months learning business law, contract interpretation, and civil procedure. I organized my evidence, prepared my arguments, and walked into that courtroom alone to face 3 opposing attorneys. The stress was overwhelming. Sleepless nights, constant anxiety, and the knowledge that losing this case could destroy everything I had worked to build. During those 6 months, my family continued to support Jake through his legal process. They attended his court dates, celebrated when his attorney negotiated a plea deal that avoided jail time, and helped him find employment when he lost his previous job due to the conviction. Their group chat was full of updates about Jake's case, encouragement, and coordination of support. I wasn't included in these discussions, and when I mentioned my ongoing legal battle, the responses were minimal and quickly overshadowed by more Jake-related family business. I won my case. The judge ruled completely in my favor, ordering the corporation to pay not only the $25,000 they originally owed me, but an additional $15,000 in damages and attorney fees. The victory was sweet, but it was also lonely. I had fought a David and Goliath legal battle and won, proving that their claims were not only false, but malicious. I had protected my reputation, recovered my money, and established my credibility as a business owner. My family's response to my legal victory was tepid congratulations and quick subject changes. There was no celebration, no acknowledgement of what I had accomplished, no recognition of the fact that I had achieved something remarkable without any of the support they had lavished on Jake. The contrast in their reactions to our respective legal outcomes revealed everything I needed to know about their priorities and values. The breaking point came 6 months later at Jake's birthday dinner. The family was celebrating his new job and discussing how well he was doing in his court-mandated counseling program. The conversation naturally turned to legal battles, and Dad began telling a story about Jake's attorney and how brilliant his defense strategy had been. Mom chimed in with praise for how well Jake had handled the whole situation, how proud they were of his growth and maturity. I listened to this revisionist history of Jake's third DUI being spun into a story of personal triumph and family support, and something inside me snapped. I found my voice and calmly shared my own legal victory story. How I had represented myself against a corporate legal team and won a $40,000 judgment. I explained the months of preparation, the complexity of business litigation, and the significance of the court's ruling in my favor. The response was uncomfortable silence, followed by Dad dismissively saying that my situation was different because it was just a business dispute, not a serious legal matter like a DUI. Mom added that I had always been good at research and paperwork, so representing myself made sense for someone with my skills. Jake actually laughed and said he could never handle representing himself because legal stuff was too complicated for him. That moment crystallized everything. Jake's criminal behavior was treated as a serious legal matter requiring expensive professional help and family support. My fraudulent lawsuit defense, which required complex business law knowledge and resulted in a significant victory, was dismissed as routine paperwork that someone with my abilities should naturally handle alone. The double standard wasn't just unfair, it was delusional. I excused myself from the dinner and drove home, finally accepting the truth I had been avoiding. My family didn't see me as someone deserving of support and protection. They saw me as a resource, the competent one who could handle her own problems while contributing to solutions for everyone else's issues. I was simultaneously too capable to need help and not important enough to receive it even when I asked. This realization forced me to examine other patterns in our family dynamics. When Emma needed help with her college applications, the whole family pitched in with editing essays, researching schools, and even hiring a college consultant. When I applied to graduate school, I handled everything alone and received criticism for choosing a program that was too expensive. When Jake needed a car down payment, Dad co-signed a loan without hesitation. When I asked for help with the down payment on my first house, I was told that homeownership was a big responsibility I should only take on if I could handle it completely independently. The financial disparity was staggering when I actually calculated it. Over the years, my parents had spent more than $50,000 on Jake's legal issues alone, not counting other forms of support like car payments, loan co-signing, and emergency financial help. Emma had received similar support for education, housing assistance, and various life transitions. My requests for help had been consistently denied or minimized, even when they were much smaller amounts or loans rather than gifts. I made a decision that night to fundamentally change my relationship with my family. I wasn't going to continue pretending that their treatment of me was normal or acceptable. I wasn't going to keep accepting the role of the self-sufficient one who gave support, but never received it. I was going to establish boundaries that protected my emotional well-being and reflected my actual value. I started by stopping my automatic responses to family crises. When Jake called asking for help with a work situation, I politely declined instead of dropping everything to solve his problem. When Mom asked me to handle logistics for a family gathering, I suggested she coordinate with Emma since I was busy with my business. When Dad needed help with a technical issue, I recommended he hire a professional instead of expecting free consulting services from me. The family's reaction to these boundary changes was immediate and telling. I was accused of being selfish, ungrateful, and distant. Mom said I was acting weird and asked if something was wrong with me. Dad suggested I was going through a phase and would return to normal soon. Jake was confused about why I wasn't available to help him anymore and seemed genuinely surprised that I had my own priorities. None of them connected my boundary setting to their years of differential treatment. The idea that their actions had consequences for our relationship seemed completely foreign to them. They expected me to continue being the family resource while accepting minimal support in return, and my refusal to maintain this dynamic was treated as inexplicable rebellion rather than natural self-protection. I decided to test my theory about their priorities with a direct conversation. I invited my parents to lunch and calmly explained how their different responses to Jake's legal issues and mine had affected me. I used specific examples and financial amounts, making it impossible for them to dismiss my concerns as misunderstandings or oversensitivity. Their response confirmed everything I suspected about their mindset. Dad explained that Jake needed more help because he wasn't as naturally capable as I was, and that helping me would be insulting because it would imply I couldn't handle things myself. Mom said that my strength was one of my best qualities, and they had always been proud of my independence. They presented their neglect as a compliment and their favoritism as appropriate resource allocation based on different needs and abilities. I pointed out that this logic was fundamentally flawed. Everyone deserves support during difficult times regardless of their capabilities, and being competent doesn't mean being invulnerable. I explained that their approach had left me feeling isolated and undervalued, like my struggles didn't matter because I could eventually solve them alone. I told them that love and support shouldn't be rationed based on perceived strength or ability. The conversation ended with them promising to think about what I had said, but their behavior didn't change. If anything, they seemed to double down on their existing patterns while becoming resentful of my new boundaries. I realized that they weren't interested in changing their treatment of me. They were only interested in returning to the previous dynamic where I accepted their neglect without complaint. My business continued to grow during this period of family tension, and I achieved several significant milestones that I celebrated alone. I landed a major client that doubled my annual revenue, was featured in a business magazine for my innovative marketing strategies, and hired my first 2 employees. Each success reinforced my confidence in my decision to prioritize my own well-being over family harmony. The vindication moment came when Jake got arrested for his 4th DUI 8 months later. This time, the consequences were unavoidable: mandatory jail time, loss of license for 5 years, and job termination. My parents went into crisis mode again, but their resources were strained from previous legal expenses and Jake's ongoing financial needs. Dad called me asking for a loan to hire Jake's attorney, explaining that this was a family emergency and we all needed to pitch in. The irony was breathtaking. After years of telling me to handle my own legal issues independently, they wanted me to contribute to Jake's 4th set of legal expenses. I politely declined, explaining that I was sure Jake could figure it out on his own, since that was the family's usual approach to legal problems. The conversation became heated, with Dad accusing me of being vindictive and holding grudges. I calmly reminded him of his exact words when I needed legal help, that legal issues were part of life and people needed to figure out how to handle them independently. I suggested that Jake's situation was a perfect opportunity for him to develop the same self-reliance they had always expected from me. Mom called later, crying and begging me to reconsider. She said Jake was family, and family members help each other during emergencies. I asked her why that principle hadn't applied when I was facing a lawsuit that threatened my career and financial future. She couldn't answer that question and eventually hung up in frustration. Jake ended up with a public defender and received the full consequences of his 4th DUI conviction. He served 6 months in jail, lost his license for 5 years, and struggled to find employment with his record. The family's ability to shield him from consequences had finally been exhausted, and he was forced to confront the reality of his choices. During this time, I continued building my business and achieved a level of success that surprised even me. I was featured as a rising entrepreneur in several publications, spoke at industry conferences, and expanded my team to 12 employees. My company was generating 7 figures in annual revenue, and I was financially independent in ways I had never imagined possible. The role reversal became complete when Emma called asking for career advice. She had graduated college but was struggling to find direction and purpose in her work life. She had heard about my business success and wanted my guidance on building a career in marketing. For the first time in our family history, one of my siblings was asking me for help with something important. I was happy to help Emma, but I established clear boundaries around our mentoring relationship. I offered to meet with her monthly to discuss career development, provided reading recommendations, and introduced her to contacts in the industry. However, I made it clear that this support was contingent on mutual respect and that I wouldn't tolerate being taken for granted or dismissed. Emma responded beautifully to these boundaries, and our relationship improved dramatically. She began treating me as an equal adult with valuable expertise rather than just the responsible sister who solved problems. She expressed genuine appreciation for my guidance and started acknowledging my achievements in family conversations. This experience showed me what healthy family relationships could look like when built on mutual respect rather than assumed roles. My parents' attitude toward me began shifting as my professional success became impossible to ignore. They started mentioning my achievements to their friends and seemed proud of my business accomplishments. However, they still couldn't acknowledge their previous treatment of me or take responsibility for years of differential support. The real test came when Dad called asking for help with their small business. Their restaurant had been struggling since the pandemic, and they were facing financial difficulties that threatened their retirement security. Dad explained that they needed someone with marketing expertise to help them rebrand and attract customers, and they had heard I was very successful in that field. I agreed to meet with them to discuss their situation, but I approached it as a professional consultation rather than family obligation. I assessed their business challenges, developed a comprehensive marketing strategy, and presented them with a detailed proposal for services. I also provided a professional fee structure that reflected the value of my expertise and time. Their reaction was mixed shock and indignation. They couldn't believe I would charge them for help when they were family members in need. Dad said he had expected me to help them for free since they were my parents and had supported me throughout my life. Mom suggested that successful children should naturally want to help their parents without expecting payment. I calmly explained that this was exactly the kind of thinking that had created problems in our relationship. They had always expected me to provide services, support, and solutions without reciprocal help when I needed it. I pointed out that they had never hesitated to pay Jake's legal expenses or Emma's educational costs, but they expected my professional expertise to be freely available simply because I was capable of providing it. I offered them a family discount on my services, but maintained that my work had value and should be compensated appropriately. I explained that this wasn't about money, it was about respect and recognition of my contributions. Their response revealed that they still saw me as a family resource rather than a successful professional, deserving of fair compensation for my expertise. They declined my services and hired a less expensive marketing consultant whose strategies were ineffective. Their business continued struggling, and they eventually had to sell at a significant loss. I felt sad about their situation but recognized that it was a natural consequence of their inability to value and properly utilize the resources available to them within their own family. Jake's situation continued deteriorating during his post-incarceration period. He struggled with employment, housing, and ongoing legal requirements. His fourth DUI had finally forced him to confront his alcohol addiction seriously, and he entered a legitimate treatment program. For the first time, he began taking genuine responsibility for his choices and their consequences. Surprisingly, Jake reached out to me directly rather than through our parents. He apologized for his previous dismissive attitude toward my achievements and acknowledged that he had taken my competence for granted. He explained that his time in jail had given him perspective on family relationships and helped him recognize patterns he had previously ignored. Jake asked if I would be willing to help him develop job search strategies and possibly provide a character reference for potential employers. I was cautiously optimistic about his apparent growth and agreed to help within appropriate boundaries. I made it clear that my support was contingent on his continued sobriety and genuine effort to change his life patterns. This interaction with Jake was dramatically different from our previous dynamic. He approached me with humility and respect, acknowledged my expertise, and expressed genuine gratitude for my help. He didn't expect or demand my assistance, but rather requested it as a favor between equals. This showed me that healthy relationships with family members were possible when built on mutual respect rather than assumed obligations. Over the following year, I maintained my boundaries while selectively rebuilding relationships with family members who demonstrated genuine change and respect. Emma and I developed a strong mentoring relationship that benefited both of us. Jake made significant progress in his recovery and career rebuilding, and our interactions became more balanced and respectful. My parents struggled most with accepting the new dynamic. They wanted to return to previous patterns where I was available for unlimited support while receiving minimal reciprocal help. They couldn't understand why I insisted on professional boundaries around my expertise or why I expected equal treatment in family decisions and financial support. The breakthrough came when Mom was diagnosed with a serious health condition that required extensive treatment and care coordination. The family rallied together, but this time the dynamic was different. Instead of expecting me to handle all the logistics while others provided emotional support, we divided responsibilities based on each person's actual availability and capabilities. I contributed my organizational skills and research abilities to coordinate Mom's care, but I also received acknowledgement and appreciation for these contributions. Jake used his newfound humility and empathy to provide emotional support. Emma handled scheduling and communication. Dad managed the financial aspects. For the first time, we functioned as a team where everyone's contributions were valued and no one was taken for granted. Mom's health crisis also provided an opportunity for honest family conversations about our relationship patterns. During one particularly difficult treatment period, she acknowledged that they had treated me unfairly over the years and had taken my competence for granted. She admitted that their different responses to Jake's legal issues and mine had been wrong and hurtful. This acknowledgement didn't erase years of differential treatment, but it was a starting point for rebuilding our relationship on healthier terms. I explained that forgiveness was possible but required genuine change in behavior, not just verbal apologies. I needed to see consistent evidence that they valued my contributions and respected my boundaries before I could fully trust them again. The healing process has been gradual and sometimes frustrating, but it's been worth the effort. My family relationships are now based on mutual respect rather than assumed roles and obligations. I receive acknowledgement for my achievements and contributions. My expertise is valued and compensated appropriately. My boundaries are respected even when they're inconvenient for others. Most importantly, I've learned that self-worth must come from within rather than from family validation. My success in business, my legal victory, my ability to establish healthy boundaries, these accomplishments are valuable regardless of whether my family recognizes them. I no longer need their approval to feel confident in my abilities and decisions. My business continues thriving, and I've used my experience to help other entrepreneurs navigate legal challenges and family dynamics that affect their professional lives. I speak regularly about the importance of boundaries in both business and personal relationships. I've discovered that my family's dismissive treatment actually prepared me for the resilience and self-reliance necessary for entrepreneurial success. The vindication I feel isn't about proving my family wrong or getting revenge for years of unfair treatment. It's about the quiet satisfaction of knowing that I've built a successful life despite their lack of support, not because of it. I've learned to value myself appropriately and demand the same from others. If you're dealing with similar family dynamics where your competence is used as an excuse for neglect, where your siblings receive support that's denied to you, where your achievements are minimized while others' struggles are amplified, I want you to know that you're not imagining these patterns. Your feelings are valid, your contributions have value, and you deserve relationships based on mutual respect and support. Setting boundaries with family members is difficult but necessary for your emotional health and personal growth. You don't have to accept differential treatment just because it's wrapped in family loyalty rhetoric. You can love your family while refusing to enable their dysfunction or accept their neglect. Your worth isn't determined by your family's inability to recognize it. Your success doesn't require their approval or support. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the freedom to build a life that reflects your actual value rather than their limited perception of it. The journey from family scapegoat to empowered individual isn't easy, but it's possible. It requires courage to challenge established patterns, strength to maintain boundaries despite pressure, and wisdom to distinguish between healthy family loyalty and enabling dysfunction. Most importantly, it requires the self-respect to demand treatment that matches your worth. Have you experienced similar patterns in your family where competence was punished with neglect, while incompetence was rewarded with support? How did you handle the realization that family love doesn't always translate into equal treatment? I'd love to hear your stories and insights in the comments. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in these experiences is the first step toward healing and empowerment.